Congresswoman Lori Trahan, and I want to thank you for tuning in to our Black History Month Facebook Live discussion. I'm thrilled to take some time to reflect on the importance of celebrating not only Black history, but also Black joy. And I couldn't think of a better guest to have that conversation with than the one and only Thaddeus Miles. He's the founder of BlackJoy, of the BlackJoy Project, and he's the director of community services at Mass Housing. So often in our schools, students are taught Black history through only one lens, portraying the hardships, the hate, and the violence that generations of Black Americans have had to persevere through and overcome to reach where we are as a nation today. And while it's absolutely essential, we know the painful parts of America's history, especially the horrific treatment of Black Americans. What's often overlooked is what Thaddeus and so many others in our community have eloquently referred to as Black joy, the positivity, camaraderie, and achievements that have empowered so many across our Commonwealth and our country to demand a more just and a more equitable America, starting long before the Civil Rights Movement and continuing on today through the Black Lives Matter movement. This past summer, when George Floyd was brutally killed at the hands of law enforcement, many Americans were forced to confront the truth that racism and inequality exists in our country. No longer could anyone avert their own eyes to what Black and Brown Americans have known all too well, that discrimination and injustice are rooted in our communities, and it's long past time for all Americans to catch up and do our part to bring about a more perfect union. Earlier this week, my colleagues and I reintroduced the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, which aims to overhaul policing in communities across the country by ending police brutality, required increase in transparency, and making sure that officers are not only held accountable for their own conduct, but also empowered to hold their colleagues to account for their actions as well. This bill is historic and necessary, but it's not the singular solution to injustice in our country, not even close. Passing the bill is a critical step in the right direction, but our agenda goes far beyond law enforcement. We've got to work to ensure every American has access to the COVID vaccine for starters, but good schools, clean air and drinking water, quality health care, essential workforce training, affordable housing, and an inclusive economy and dignified criminal justice system. But we're working to change the pattern that always seems to end in inaction, especially in the halls of Congress. Committees in the House are hard at work looking at racial inequality in other areas of life, from our education system to the housing market. And we must confront structural racism in every facet of our lives. And we all must be prepared to listen and to learn and to take these teachings with us to ensure this moment is a catalyst for change. Having President Biden and Vice President Harris in the White House gives us a great opportunity to enact many of the reforms that we hope to see. But this is just the beginning of our movement, a movement that is focused on justice, and this morning focused on joy, which is why I could not be more excited to be here, virtually of course, with Thaddeus Miles. Thaddeus is an author, an internationally recognized award-winning photographer. He is currently the Director of Community Services at Mass Housing, where he is responsible for 3 impact areas: housing stability, knowledge, and capacity building, and strengthening families and communities across our Commonwealth. For his first 20 years at Mass Housing, Thaddeus was responsible for designing and implementing crime prevention strategies affecting multifamily housing developments throughout the Commonwealth by creating strategies that directly engage residents in addressing quality of life issues, sustainable cities, and confronting the complexities of social justice issues. Thaddeus garnered insights and strategies from his international work at Harvard Law School and community urban planning programs at MIT. These experiences reinforced his steadfast commitment to ensuring that the most underserved in our communities have genuine opportunities for success and achievement. As I mentioned earlier, Thaddeus is also founder of the BlackJoy Project and the founder of HoodFit. He's also currently the co-chair of My Brother's Keeper, Boston, and chair of Becoming a Man in Boston. He was recently awarded the GK 100, 2018, Boston's 100 Most Influential People of Color, and the Visionary Award from the Timothy Smith Foundation. Embracing the Legacy by the Robert F. Kennedy Action Corps, the Directors Community Award by the Director of the FBI. Thaddeus is also a veteran of the United States Air Force and a devoted father and grandfather, and I'm so grateful to be able to call him a friend. He makes me feel like an underachiever. Thaddeus.
I don't know if that's even possible.
That is an unbelievable bio. Wow. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on, Madam Congresswoman.
It's great to see you, and I hope soon we'll be able to see each other in person. But I know we don't have a ton of time today. I want to get right to it, and I'm going to kick us off just with a short question, and that is, Thaddeus, what does Black history mean to you?
Yeah, I don't know if that's a short question. I could talk about that for the hour that we have, or 30 minutes that we have. But Black history, first I'd say that Black history moments happen every day, but is invisible to many. To me, Black history validates that our greatness is older than our oppression, that our strength is greater than our struggle. It proves daily that we belong everywhere, and that Black excellence, Black creativity, Black innovation, Black resilience, Black joy that we're talking about is our fist of power.
Yeah. Oh, that's terrific. As both an artist and an activist, how would you characterize the relationship between your art and your activism? And, if you could just speak to how one contributes to the other.
Well, when I think about it, I don't separate them, right? It's sort of like we don't really talk as much about intersectionality, right? Of all the different components of an individual and how they overlap and how they influence what we do. So, but when I think about art gives people an opportunity to experience the moment of tension that you can continue to explore different outcomes, right? When you see one of my photos, you can talk about it more often. Art gives me hope and courage. Art brings a creative lens and gives voice to difficult conversations. And I started to think back to the Black arts movement back in the 70s with the sounds of Nia Simone, the Young, Gifted, and Black, as well as the poetry of Nikki Giovanni and the books of James Baldwin. And I think about how the art movement fueled funk music, right, which led to hip hop, and how photography and documentaries have changed the hearts and souls and minds of many for the good and some for the bad, right? When we think about what's happening now, when we think about the civil rights, all of that came through people actually seeing it, right? It's something about seeing it versus hearing about it that makes a real difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it does. None of these things exist in a silo, right? It's all connected, and it's influenced our music, as you just said. And you must have been so proud seeing Amanda Gorman use her poetry and her ability to convey such an important message on Inauguration Day. With the force and the grace of her words. It was just unbelievable.
Yeah, I think the good thing for me about it is I was there, right? I was in Washington. If you remember, I know very few people went, but I was in Washington, and I did a whole photography series on the 3 days before, the day before, the day of, and the day after. And I saw people weeping, and it brought tears to my eye at the same time.
It was so emotional. I mean, I brought my oldest son, and he, we cried, we laughed, we held each other. I mean, it was just a range of emotions, but nothing was more poignant than that poem, which the delivery was as powerful as the words. So Black History Month celebrates the cultural, artistic, and societal contributions of Black Americans in our country. It's a time to center awareness on the immense impact of Black Americans on the arts and sciences, technology, and across all of our society. This month, we've seen an incredible outpouring on social media celebrating this idea of Black joy, of framing these contributions in a more positive light. So I wonder if you could just sort of describe, what does this mean to you? Talk a little bit about your project of bringing Black joy to our community.
So before I jump into the project, I just want to say what it means a little bit differently. I'll tell you a quick story. So in the past, I've been on 20 conversations about Black history. Last Saturday, I was on with an engineering school that talk about Black history and to have that conversation. It was the first. I was just on with 600 kids, and it
Wow.
was their first Black History Month celebration at their high school. So to me, it was interesting. But I showed 11 engineers or Black engineers that are history making individuals to this prestigious school, and nobody on the call, the few hundred, knew any of them.
Yeah.
I was like, if anybody can tell me 5 of them, I give you $1,000. Nobody could tell me one. And so one was the person that actually helped invent the handheld computer. Another one was around Apollo 13. Another one created the laser surgery to remove cataracts from the eyes. So, it's pretty interesting when you start to think about it. And so for me, BlackJoy, my contribution to the collective narrative of the power and influence of Black traditions in the world.
Yeah.
It's a testimony and strength of the strength and resilience of our people. Most importantly, for me, it's a love letter to Black people to see you in all your glory and your splendor. The project itself gives us the opportunity to celebrate Black achievements all year long, because I think Black history should be all year long, and it is American history. I know people have some feelings about that, but until we can get to that, where all people know. As an example, I'm at this prestigious school about engineering, and nobody knows any of these Black engineers, and that's the field that they want to major in.
Right.
You know what I mean? But it's also being able to tell those particular stories that I just told. But it's also about giving voice. My Black project, BlackJoy Project, is to remind us to feed our seed of resilience daily. Is to create space to experience and explore Black joy from various points of entry. Maya Angelou said, "We need joy like we need air," and I believe that, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, pushing that every day and every moment that I can allows people to be able to breathe and allows us to remember that our resilience, it grows through our joy.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've talked about this before, but I think by highlighting the positivity, Black joy, those moments that sometimes we take for granted, but it so much exemplifies who we are, whether it's with our children, whether it's with our grandparents, in our community. I mean, that is what makes us all relatable to each other. That is when you see we have, so much more in common than we have in difference. And I think that is such a beautiful way to talk about the celebration of diversity in our community, is through what we have in common, and celebrating the joys of everyday life, which I have to tell you, I think Facebook and some of our social media channels were in the beginning, in the early days, like that's people shared. They should share their easy life moments. And now, so much has happened in our discourse and our political discourse that's, it's just dividing us, when really what we need to focus on is what binds us, what connects us.
No, I absolutely agree. I think one of the things I was on the panel with Ayanna Presley, Congresswoman Presley, last night, and we were talking about the Black joy and how it also humanizes us, right? To others that may not see us as humans at times. And that's how a Black boy that's 12 gets shot, right? Holding a toy gun. Because a lot of these younger kids that are 12 and 13, Black boys, are actually seen and perceived to be Black men. And so being able to, I love showing pictures of my grandson, my son, me out there being silly, because, that's what I want people to also be able to see of me. Right. So there's this thing of, I'm 6'4", 300 pounds, and I can be intimidating. but the reality is if something's happening, I'm going to be the person to step in front of it, right, for you. If you have something traumatic happen in your life, I'm going to be the person that you can come to. And if you just need to cry and me not say anything, I'm going to allow you to cry on my shoulder and me just not speak. right? But if that's the power of really being able to connect, and I don't even really have to know you to allow you to be able to be vulnerable. And I'm that guy that's vulnerable, but I'm also that guy that, when I'm watching a movie, I cry a lot, right? Sad movies make me
We have
cry.
that in common. We have that in common. Oh no, and you've demonstrated that spirit, over your whole life. I mean, it's pretty incredible. And well, so I'm just so thrilled that we're having this conversation. And so bringing it back to this month, which we are going to make year long. What policies do you see as most essential to ushering in, a more equitable, a more inclusive society? What would you like to see on your watch?
So I think one thing is, for me, I sort of agree with, like, most people don't know and don't think about it. Canada also celebrates Black History Month through February, the whole month of February. And their theme is the future is now. The United Kingdom celebrates Black History Month, but they celebrate it in October, right? So there's some different things. And so, when we think about it, the future is today. And so there's when I started to think about policies, and I started to think about crises, when I started to think about these pandemics that we're dealing with, because we're dealing with like 15 to 20 pandemics in reality that are compounding stress and anxiety, which in turn turns to trauma, which is the result of some of the depression and the other medical stuff that we see happening today. But when I think about the housing crisis, right? When I think about the lack of affordable housing and the policies that keep families there when they are there, when it's about moving from that generation to generation, which leads me to start thinking about wealth building. And I think about in Massachusetts right now during the COVID, the prices of homes are increased by 20%. So, when they started to think about equity, and I started to think about home ownership, but the banks that still don't make loans based on zip code and based on race, even though it's illegal, they found different ways to sort of deal with that. And you saw a lot of that during the COVID relief bill that that you're working with. When I think about businesses, I think about Boston having 5 years, $2.1 billion in contracts in the last 5 years, and only $9 million of that went to Black businesses. That's less than a penny, right? That's 0.4%. And when I started to think about healthcare, I started to think about the many under-resourced communities around the country that have life expectancies in the 50s, while white communities that are less than 2 miles away from them have life expectancies in the 80s, right? That's a 30-year difference. And it's people think that it's Boston, but it's all over the country, right? And there's many ramifications from that, and there are many causes. And I also think about like what we're currently in. When I think about here in Massachusetts, almost 600,000 whites have received the vaccines and less than 80,000 Blacks, and it's not because they don't want it. Right. So for me, there's housing, there's healthcare, there's education, there's police reform are the best places to start. I don't want to get into police reform because we'll be talking about that for like, the next 2 hours, and you won't be able to go back and vote on what you need to vote on. But those are my critical components of
I couldn't agree more. I often say to folks, if you're not down here in Washington working on healthcare and housing, I don't know what the heck you came down here for, right? Those are the two critical pieces that really set a family up, right? There's not much you can do when you can't afford your health care or your life-saving prescription drugs. And if you don't have a roof over your head, you can't support your loved ones. And it has this ripple effect, of course, on everything else, whether you can get or keep a job, what your economic opportunity is, whether you can put food on your table. I mean, it is unbelievable to me that we are as far behind as we are, living in the United States of America on those two critical issues. And I think you are going to see a lot of work done this year, this moment. I mean, when we say build back better, I mean, those are words that is now a guiding principle, right? It's not we're going back to normal, right? We're not we've got this opportunity to wring out these lessons that have been, the sun has shone a light on them all this past year, and to rebuild correctly. So I think it's really important to kind of be reminded that even as we're rolling out this vaccine, that we're doing it equitably, we're accelerating the hell out of it, and we're making sure that everything that we do is through a more equitable and a more just lens.
Yeah, because I think for me, I didn't really understand some of this until my mom retired.
Yeah.
And then she went on Medicare, Medicaid. I'm not even sure which one it was. And she called me crying and said she went to get her medicine and said she had a $4,000 donut hole. I'm like, what the hell is a donut hole? And, luckily for her, she has 3 privileged kids that do pretty well, and we cover that. But it was an interesting piece to learn for somebody that had worked 30 years and now needs something that she's got to put up the first, $4,000 before she can even get any reduction. And she wasn't making that much, right? So.
Right. Well, I know they just called a vote. I've kind of got my eye on that screen, but I do, you mentioned Black History Month. It helps us reflect on how far we've come, but it also really puts a spotlight on the immense amount of work ahead to address systemic racism, racial inequality. And you said it's needn't be a month. So what advice do you have for people who are looking to sustain the movement for justice? What are some of the best ways that folks in our community can help, especially as we look to continue this movement, beyond this month of celebration?
Yeah, so I think the first thing before I even, I love the first part of your question about how far we've come. That's challenging for me because I think about today marks 9 years since the murder of Trayvon Martin.
Yeah.
Right. And so when we think about it, it's about how far we've come. I'm challenged around that because I know we've done certain things, but I still feel like, just 4 months ago, it was George Floyd, it was, Breonna Taylor, it was so on and so forth. Yeah. And it seems that the cameras and the better the camera phones get, the more work that we have to do to expose. But I would say in 2 lenses. I say for Black people, I would say have compassion for yourself as you move forward in your purpose. Make sure that you're doing some self-care to take care of yourself mentally, physically, spiritually, because those are important for you to stay in the fight, right? We need you to stay in the fight. And for others, I would say there's a couple of things. I say one would be to move from pity to compassion. A lot of people get those mixed up in how you're acting. There's pity, there's sympathy, there's empathy, and then there's compassion. And compassion means that you've looked at it, you studied it, you've engaged in it, and now you want to relieve that person's suffering, and so you're going to act from a point that's more reasonable and rational. And then I would say really focus on this thing of being an anti-racist, right? To be able to move from the fear zone to the learn zone to the growth zone. And if people don't know what that is, I don't have enough time to explain it, but if you look at it, the fear, learn, and grow around being an anti-racist. Educate yourself on a particular movement and dive in, right? Dive in because you're compassionate about it. Don't just dive in because it's a good Instagram moment or it's another moment. Don't just march because you want to get something on IG or create your own historical moment to say that you were there. Work on your own habits and beliefs. A lot of times we're looking at everybody else, but we don't spend the time to look at us. That's me. Hey, me. What am I projecting? What am I branding? Take the time to look at that. Take action in your community, right? It's not always about, I live in Lowell, your office is right here in my building, right? It's an amazing opportunity. Take action in your community. Volunteer your time, right? So figure out, we all have time. You're busy, I'm busy, but we also volunteer a lot, right? So, people can't tell me anything when I see you, Ayana, and others out here volunteering. And I know you're back and forth to Washington every other day. Now, you can't tell me you can't find the time to do that. And I think the last thing is really, and I always feel it's important, organizations need funding to sustain themselves. So find something that you care about. And if you can donate. And the reality is I sort of think about it, and it doesn't matter if it's $1 or $100,000. Every dollar counts, every penny counts in order for an organization that's doing something that's creating impact in the community and helping serve people and putting people first. to me, deserves an opportunity to be sustained and to continue to grow. And that happens through funding.
Yeah, that is so important. And I think sometimes people hesitate maybe to come off the sidelines because, you know, maybe they haven't given or they don't consider them, they think of like philanthropic giving or donating is for other folks. They don't realize that, like, when you're talking grassroots, when you're talking movement, every bit helps. And, you know, just it pulls you in, right? Whether it's giving $1 or $5 or $10, or, you know, just working in your community. I mean, there is so much happening right now in the world, and it can feel daunting. But I've always, you know, realized, or always was sort of taught, like, just do what you can, right? Get out, start in the community that you live in, and that multiplies. And is what we need from. And plus, it's just so empowering. I mean, sometimes when you feel daunted, you feel as though you don't have the power to impact change, but you actually do. And so much of it happens right in our community. It's where I get so much of my inspiration and frankly, my motivation to come here and do this work. Well, you know, you didn't disappoint, Thaddeus. You excuse me, you always come with some profound words and just some real pragmatic next steps for people, which is a gift. And I hate to say that that's all the time we have for today. I can't thank you enough for taking the time out of your incredibly busy schedule to take and participate in this important discussion with me. It means the world to me, and I know everyone tuning in greatly appreciates hearing from you. I also want to thank everyone. Oh, go ahead.
So before we close, I know you got to close out. I know you got to vote, but I just want to say thank you for the work that you're doing in Lowell. Thank you for the work that you're doing in this country. Thank you for being authentic about everything it is that you do. And thank you for keeping that beautiful smile out in front of folks so that they can appreciate the aspects of joy that happens each and every day in each person's life, and that you continue to get them to feed that seed of resilience through joy. Thank you for this opportunity to have a conversation. I truly appreciate you and look forward to voting for you in the next election.
Well, thank you. I wasn't even expecting that wonderful endorsement. But, you know, you taught us all a lot just about the simple pleasures and the, you know, uplifting aspects of everyday life and sort of focusing on that joy. You know, I'm an optimist. I think, you know, we have much better days ahead. I think that, you know, when we're all in this together, rather than us against them and, you know, just falling into these divides or these tribes, that, you know, we're just going to be better off. And so, thank you. Thank you for participating in this discussion. Thank you for everything that you do. And I hope to see you in person some point soon. It feels incredible to me that we do share a building, and I haven't seen you in way too long. But you take care of yourself, and everybody out there, please. We're not out of this. We're not out of this pandemic yet. I know that there's a light at the end of this tunnel that we are racing toward, but I'm a mom, so I have to say it. Keep wearing that mask, keep socially distancing, washing your hands, you know, just we've gotten this far together, and we want to get through this. So take care, Thaddeus. Thanks again, and I will see you soon.